Kia ora and welcome back. I hope everyone is feeling energised after lunch. I'm Graydon Diprose. I'm on the organising group. I'm an environmental social scientist at the Bioeconomy Science Institute. So this session, we've got 8 presenters and they are speaking from different perspectives, focusing on the food and the fibre sectors. We asked our presenters to pose kind of 3 questions. What innovation have you seen in your industry? What barriers do you face? And what research needs do you have in relation to circularity? So that was kind of the brief, but people are interpreting that in ways that make, is meaningful for them. So just to kind of, this whole symposium has been funded by Massey University through a strategic something fund, and research something fun. And the point is to connect university with industry, and so that's why we're focusing on food and fibre, because that's a key strategic focus for Massey University. So our first presentation is by Craig Anderson, and Craig is a science team leader from the Bioeconomy Science Institute. So he's prepared a presentation that actually focuses on energy in relation to the primary production sector in New Zealand. So we're starting with that because it's kind of setting a bit of a scene for some of the stuff that might come later. And the other reason we're starting with him is because there has been some kind of criticism of circular economy research that claims that it's kind of blind to the energy implications, particularly fossil fuel, peak oil, peak diesel, that kind of stuff. So he's going to be talking about that. Some of it's quite technical, but there's some really interesting stuff here in terms of thinking about the future of circularity. So yeah, this is pre-recorded, so I'm just going to hit play and hopefully this will all work.
Kia ora. I'm Craig and I'm a biogeoscientist with the Bioeconomy Science Institute. The rough brief for this presentation was to highlight the significance of energy and transitions with respect to circular economies. A very tough ask in 10 minutes. My interest in energy stems from the work of ecologist Howard Odum, who in the early 70s pioneered the concept of energy return on energy invested, or EROEI, or to put another way, the energy cost of energy. The concept is simple. In biology, it is 100% unsustainable if an organism uses more energy finding food than it gets in return after eating the food. This concept can be applied across many scales and disciplines, from a single microbial cell through to modern civilization, with the latter being what we will concern ourselves with today. There are 3 main take-homes from this presentation. The first is we are blind to the enormous amount of hidden energy that supports our civilization. The second is that energy is the economy, whether it's circular or not. And the third is an energy transition will happen, but don't expect it to resemble what has been advertised. What is EROEI? To date, we've used roughly 50% of Earth's fossil fuel endowment of oil, gas, and coal. Starting from the left-hand side of this figure, when we first started extracting fossil fuels, it was easy. We'd put 1 barrel of oil energy equivalent in, that's the pale blue, and get 100 barrels out, the darker blue, an EROEI of 100 with little cost to GDP, which is the red line. Now we have to go offshore, we're drilling deeper, we're applying new technologies, and we are sourcing oil from more difficult geological conditions. It now costs us at least 10 barrels of oil energy equivalent to get 100 barrels out, an EROEI of 10 or lower, and the GDP cost is higher. If we examine all other raw materials, it is the same story. We've taken the easy, low-hanging fruit first, and what's left is much harder, more energy intensive, and more expensive to get. In the meantime, our population has expanded exponentially, and so have our expectations. The estimated EROEI to sustain our current civilization at a basic level is 7, and we've been flirting with 7 for some time. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why is this guy talking about fossil fuels? Aren't we transitioning? And the answer is kinda, maybe. The global economy is still more than 90% reliant on fossil fuels. Despite global renewable electricity generation capacity reaching 33% and increasing, the electricity sector only supplies around 1/5 of overall energy used globally, while energy demand is increasing. With this in mind, New Zealand finds itself in the lucky position of having 80 to 85% renewable electricity. However, in reality, our economy is 70% fossil fuel dependent when considering our overall energy needs. The electricity sector and the renewables within are also entirely dependent on fossil fuels for mining raw materials and turning those raw materials into electrical supply infrastructure such as concrete, steel, aluminium, copper, solar panels, turbines, etc., and for maintenance, upgrading, expansion, replacement, recycling, and disposal of infrastructure components when they reach end of life. In this context, renewables are better termed rebuildables and are currently icing on the cake. To enable comparison of apples to apples, EROEI calculations should consider all energy used to deliver energy at the point of use. For example, supply of petrol at the pump versus electricity at an EV charging station. If EROEI is only calculated with respect to the energy at the source rather than at the point of use, we greatly underestimate the actual energy required to run and maintain our complex civilization. On this diagram, coal at the mine has an EROEI of 80, but in reality the net energy delivered is much lower as there are transport losses, thermal losses, transmission losses, etc. EROEI can improve with technology, but not much. We no longer have an energy source combination that can deliver an EROEI higher than 10 at the scales required to meet our expectations. Connecting energy to the economy requires us to look at how much net energy is delivered that can support economic activity. The increase in red arrow thickness represents the larger volume of energy required to get energy as EROEI deteriorates. If the volume of energy is expanding, then we don't really notice deterioration in EROEI, but economic growth rates likely contract. However, if expansion of energy supply slows down or stops, the net energy for driving economic activity and delivering essentials to society is constrained, leading to persistent inflation in all goods and services. All economic activity consumes energy sources of all types at varying scales. Any perturbation in energy supply quickly impacts economic activity, our ability to support human development needs, and to deliver on other goals like environmental restoration. Energy is the economy. This is probably the most important correlation that economists seem to ignore. There are no rich countries that consume low amounts of energy. Prosperity, measured as GDP, is highly correlated to energy use. Very crudely, on this graph, a halving of energy availability would result in about a 30% reduction in GDP. The same is approximately true for social progress. Countries with low energy struggle to lift social progress. This is very nuanced here, though, with respect to governance. I'm not sure where New Zealand sits on this graph, but we usually have a good social progress score, and our oil use per capita is slightly higher than Denmark, so we probably reside somewhere on the graph around Denmark. Why are global economies sputtering? Simply put, fossil fuel production has stagnated pre-COVID, and overall EROEI has potentially dropped below 7. Notice that preceding major economic recessions in the mid-70s, early 80s, the 90s, the dot-com crash in 2000, and the 2008 financial crisis, there were perturbations in oil production. Most of these recessionary periods were relieved when new extraction methodologies became economic and matured, such as offshore drilling techniques in the North Sea in the 80s, that's the light grey, and fracking post-2008, that's the bright yellow. When we have plentiful oil, we have excess energy to put into economic growth. With respect to the foundations of the economy that you and I interact with every day, the fraction of oil that is the most important is diesel. Diesel runs tractors, think agriculture, trucks, trains, ships, think supply chains, mining equipment, think commodities, etc. Although oil production has been going up since 2008 because of fracking, the resulting shale oil, also known as light tight oil, has a very small heavy fraction from which diesel is derived. Diesel production stagnated after 2008. Declining global diesel inventories now underpins the cost of living crisis, as all aspects of our lives are touched by diesel. Lack of economic growth opportunities in the energy-intensive productive economy have disappeared, while the low energy-intensive unproductive economy, the so-called FIRE economy, finance, insurance, real estate, has exploded, along with inequality and unconventional ways to juice the economy, such as quantitative easing. If the energy cost of energy is properly accounted for in economic models, then it becomes clear that prosperity, the red lines and the graphs on the right, will decline, as energy constraints will mean we will spend more on securing energy for delivering essentials. This is true for all countries and underpins the great power politics and social upheavals we're witnessing today, as resource scarcity is now colliding with monetary hegemony. In your daily lives, research and businesses, in fact any of your endeavours, it will become imperative to consider how to minimise resource and energy use. Any inputs derived from elsewhere in the economy, or even inputs that are considered waste products, have an energy footprint, or will require energy input and other resources to transform them from waste into something useful. There are also infrastructure and supply chains to consider, with a small country in the Southwest Pacific becoming less attractive as the cost of acquiring energy and resources escalates. My advice would be to degrow, think local and act local as our energy landscape transforms. Okay, that's it. If you want to hear the full story about diesel, or you would like a more agriculture-focused assessment, then please contact me.
Let's give him a clap. In conversations with Craig, while we were talking about this, he said lots of his colleagues don't want to hear this story. And you can, yeah. And I mean, I feel like we've seen it play out with local government elections where there were debates, people don't want rates rises, but they're inevitable, right? Because we've got, as kind of Craig pointed out, all of the maintenance, infrastructure, all that kind of stuff is linked to diesel. Craig isn't here, so we're not going to take time for questions, so we're going to move straight on. Next up, we have Emily Levenson. Emily's an environmental policy advisor at Horticulture New Zealand, and she works on policy related to resource management, climate change, freshwater, land, energy, and waste. Welcome up, Emily.
I think Jacob was up next, but...
Oh, okay, yes.
But thank you.
So, like to welcome Jacob Laws. Yay! Jacob is a project manager at the Agri-Chain Centre and does a lot of work on horticulture and arable and horticulture mainly, yeah.
Mostly, yeah. Food supply chains. Yep.
Thank you, Jacob. Oh, just so the format, Jacob will probably speak for between 5 and 8 minutes, and then we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions. Mm-hmm. I'll stand up if you go too long.
Okay, so let's see if this works. Yes. All right, so normally this takes 2 hours. I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to rush through this. So here's who I am: project manager, technical advisory group's project manager and sustainability representative for the pan produce body United Fresh, New Zealand representative on the Sustainability Committee for the International Federation for Produce Standards, and manager of the industry publication Fresh Facts, which deals with data collection, data analysis and publication on all the facts and stats about the fresh produce industry, from the farm through to the retail. And I have a Master's of Sustainable Development Goals focused on data and governance and how do you prove you are sustainable. Sustainability, my background, I've been working in this industry for 15 years now. Sustainability, up to about 8 to 9 years, been working on sustainability both within New Zealand and internationally, working for MFAT on sustainable cocoa production, Tonga agricultural diagnostics, MFE on the National Policy Statement, Freshwater Management and Vegetables Review, industry sustainability guidelines, and also just recently we've just finished developing and releasing a quick wins assessment tool on helping businesses measure and improve their sustainability. And then looking at sustainable consumption, we've got MPI, supply chain resilience and COVID, as well as supply chain reviews on how supply chains could be optimised in New Zealand for a significant national retailer. So circularity, it's the typical theory behind sustainable resource use, in that we have our circle. However, like everything else, we often see talks about the circularity in the same vein as sustainability, where you'll see talks of sustainable growth, sustainability, consistency, sustainable returns, and sustainable practices. And you'll often see these in documents, annual reports, letters from the chair, PR press releases, quotes at media releases, anything that a company may put, or a business may put out, you often hear the word sustainable. But where's the proof? Well, our observations from the industry and from collecting the data is that the talk is much more common than the action. But this is down to a couple of reasons. Misunderstandings about the extent of what sustainability is and what it means for people, an overly narrow focus on particular aspects while ignoring the rest of it, goals and targets without SM, AR or T, reliance on the laws and regulations to force people to do the job on the assumption that if the government's not regulating it, well, it obviously doesn't matter, passing the buck on the basis that, well, we can wait for someone else to do it better, or even just awaiting the worst offenders of, well, I'm the best in the industry, why should I improve until everyone gets on my level? And you'll see here just 3 particular examples from New Zealand for the last year or so of these particular actually occurring in the news. So the reality is, like everything else in a particular supply chain, is circularity, especially in the food industry, is actually a leaky tyre. That while we're hoping for lots of reuse and going through the cycle supply chain, most of it's actually heading through to the disposal step. So measuring the leaks, do things like these look familiar to you people? Yes? Well, you're saying, hey, energy consumption up, renewable energy here, good, numbers nice. Well, but how do you get these? How do you build these? Well, in our case, we've got an international framework that you can use called the Sustainable Development Goals that actually allows us, both as an organisation or an industry or as a country, to actually build against an internationally accepted framework with goals, as targets and indicators. So we've got a system which has the specifics, the measurable, the achievable, the realistic and the time-bound. So this system is fully smart-based. And it's already made for us. It's one that we can use, and it's even been put out by the United Nations, which makes it an additional plus if we can say, well, it wasn't us who did this, it was the big boys. So for us in the industry, well, you can lead the horse to water. United Fresh published this a couple of years ago, the Sustainable Development Goals Guidelines, teaching about, in a New Zealand context, how we could do this for the fresh produce industry. Gave a link to the government's work of the Government Indicators Aotearoa 2019, and it showed how we can actually convert larger goals such as the SDG framework into actual specific and implementable actions within the fresh produce industry. But you'll note here we're talking about it as a guideline. It's a guideline, but it's not actually doing the measurement, which was left to the businesses because the businesses should know what's best for them. However, when we get to the actual looking at what a business is actually implementing, so United Fresh publishes a little book called Fresh Facts, as I said, which is the facts and stats for the industry, looking at what is actually happening in the industry. And it's data focused, and we've got stuff such as the Sustainable Development Guidelines now built into it, as well as other frameworks such as the Aotearoa Horticulture Action Plan, which is supposed to take us out to 2035, looking at what and how we measure, because we need to make sure that we're measuring optimally and that we're using accurate data for our optimum outcomes. And we're continuing to expand the amount of pages and data in this related to sustainability. But when we start to look at the numbers, uptake's limited. Lots of people talking, almost 94% of people are saying we're sustainable. When we're actually looking at use of frameworks or even just mentioning frameworks, we're down at 30% already. When we start to get to the actual adoption or measurement of frameworks, we're down to 16 to 17%. So only about 1 in 6 of us are actually using a recognised framework or telling people we're using a recognised framework for the measurement of sustainability in the industry. And I can't give you too much more about the 2025 reports because unfortunately Fresh Facts 2025 is not out until next week or so, but yeah, so lots of people mentioning it, but not actually measuring the reality. So how do we actually measure the reality? Well, that's where you need tools and assessments that are available, such as this one, which, as I said, has just recently been developed by the AgriChain Centre. So saying, hey, look, let's actually assess you from frameworks such as the SDGs to tell you how are you actually doing as opposed to what you think you're doing. Because the reality is your unsubstantiated data is no better than propaganda. It's just words. And you need this data because the data-backed results can support the appropriate governance and legal operations. Because when an auditor comes to you and goes, where's your documentation? You go, I don't have it, I'm just vibing. The auditor's going to sit there and go, no. So in summary, we're currently seeing an over-reliance on others to make things better. Data is an essential priority to walk the talk. Frameworks are important, but just as important is actually measurement, because while you may be having a framework, if you're not measuring, well, auditor still says no. The industry data has consistently shown that words are not matching actions, meaning that we, as an industry, as a business, as a nation, as a globe, need to start actually assessing our sustainability on the basis of data and not just letting the words. But there are tools that you can assess yourself in New Zealand or in an industry-specific manner. There's no need to rely on overseas companies or overseas measurements when you can go to New Zealand, when there are systems in New Zealand that you can use. And finally, if you're wanting to do sustainability, use data to ensure you walk the walk.
Thank you, Jacob. I think we've got time for one question for Jacob. Is there any questions out there?
I have one if no one else has one. This might be a really dumb question, but how much of our fresh produce do we export? Or like, what percentage of our fresh produce do we export overseas, if any? And I guess, is it going to be possible to reduce that number somehow and start making our fresh produce like cheaper here? And do you do any of that in your work, or like encourage any of that?
Yes, so export-wise, 80 to 90% of fruit, 20% of vegetables. Pricing-wise, jumping into the New Zealand market, as we saw in COVID, can cause pricing drops, but it actually does lead to further problems of a lot of the pricing around exports is different grades of product to what typically ends up in New Zealand, as well as different volumes, because a lot of what we export is kiwi fruit and apples, which leads to oversupply in the market far, far beyond what consumers are actually demanding. So you just end up with lots of product then just rotting. So it doesn't actually have the effect on prices that you might expect. And then some of it is often oversupply at certain periods where consumers might be wanting it later in the year, but it's not available at that time because it's rotted. So our imports and exports are actually balanced around conscious seasonal supply to ensure that there's food available and consumers want it. Yeah, so it does have some effect, but reducing it is not actually going to have the effect on prices that you might expect.
Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah, nice. And if anyone else wants to ask questions later, I've got plenty of business cards so you can just email me them directly. Yeah, yes?
Oh, no.
Hi.
Cool, thank you.
No worries.
Now, so we have Emily now. Oh. Sorry, yes, Pounamu is not here. Why am I not looking at the thing, What is going on? Wow. Lessons on how not to cheer, Emily, come and take over, please.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to go now. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Emily Levenson, and I'm an environmental policy advisor at Horticulture New Zealand. We are the industry body that represents commercial fruit and vegetable growers in New Zealand. So we're levy funded. Every sale of fruits and vegetables goes towards our budget, and then we are advocates on behalf of those growers to government. Our growers are an incredibly diverse bunch, growing over 100 types of fruits and vegetables, and we represent all of them. So the first thing that I was asked to talk about today was a success story for the circular economy in the fruit and vegetable sector. And one of the parts of our sector that came to mind was the glasshouse industry. So you might know that lots of your vegetables are grown in glasshouses, and these glasshouses are heated in the winter so that you can access tomatoes all year round if you want to eat them all year round. This is an example of one particular massive glasshouse site, but in the middle what you see is the Reparoa organic waste processing plant. So this is where Auckland has curbside collection of their food scraps. Those food scraps are trucked 260 kilometers to Reparoa, where they go in these big anaerobic digesters. And one of the byproducts of this process is in biogas that's used to heat the glasshouses and grow lots of delicious tomatoes, mostly for the domestic market. What I think is the most interesting part of this facility is that a lot of glasshouse growers heat using natural gas, and one of the barriers for them of moving to other energy sources is that they capture CO2 from that natural gas and pump it into the glasshouses to improve plant yields. So without another source of CO2, it's really hard to economically justify moving to a different energy source. With this facility, they can capture the CO2 from the anaerobic digestion process, put it into the glasshouses. Amazing, beautiful, lots of tomatoes for New Zealanders. The thing that I look at when I see this is that this is great, but this is not very replicable, right? Like, this is one glasshouse business, Every glasshouse in New Zealand is not going to be able to co-locate with massive anaerobic digesters that are processing lots of food scraps from Auckland. So it's great if you've got lots of money, infrastructure investment, other uses for this facility, but this was not funded by growers on their own. So that's the bit that I want to talk about in this short talk, is that access to capital. And in order to understand the economic constraints on the vegetable industry in New Zealand, you have to understand some of those domestic economic dynamics. So this chart that I've made here, all of these lines represent monetary flows throughout our supply chain. So bigger line is more money of product and smaller line is less, and I just use money because that's the data that's available. But the most important thing to notice about this chart is that most of the vegetables consumed by New Zealand households are grown in New Zealand. And almost all of the vegetables grown in New Zealand are going to New Zealand households. That means that growers are operating within the domestic market, and so they're constrained by what's happening in that market. So what makes up the price of a vegetable? When you go to the supermarket and you buy a broccoli, why does it cost the amount that it does? Well, supermarkets price at the amount that consumers are willing to pay based on supply and demand. Within that price, growers have a lot of inputs that they have to pay for. So that's fertilizer, transportation, labor, compliance, sprays, packaging, et cetera. These costs have been going up a lot over time, which that presentation we just had about diesel is a great example of why some of those costs are going up very quickly. At the other end, we've got a supermarket duopoly, only really two major buyers for fresh vegetables. They take a markup, they take a profit off of that product, and most growers sell through wholesalers who take a markup as well. So whatever's left there, that is what the grower earns. And in recent years in particular, this has been getting smaller and smaller, with many vegetable growers even having to sell below the cost of production. I've heard from many growers telling me this is happening to them, and there are many growers thinking about exiting the market because they are not able to make a profit off of growing healthy, nutritious, delicious food for New Zealanders. So when it comes to waste, the cost of managing food loss has to fit within that dynamic. Right now, a lot of vegetable growers pay to truck their product that doesn't meet market specifications for animal feed. So if they could just have a cost-neutral option, amazing. They would definitely want to look into that. If you could get them an option that could add value, that could put some financial sustainability into their businesses, help them keep operating, that would be amazing. The thing is that in order to develop those products, you need some maybe capital for processing. You need a market of people who are willing to buy those products. So there are constraints there as well. And so I think it's really worth noticing that when you look at the value add products that currently exist in the horticulture sector, almost all of them come from the fruit sector. And that's what Jacob was telling us about, that a lot of fruit is for export. There's money in the industry to invest in things like, in the middle, that's a vegan leather alternative being developed from kiwi fruit residues by Scion. How cool. But in order to, they say that you can't be green if you're in the red. You need some money in order to participate in sustainability. And so that brings me to some of my research questions for all of you, is I really wonder, currently we import a lot of fruit and vegetable processed products. Are there opportunities for domestic sourcing instead? Take, for example, onion powder, which we import almost all of it from India. What if we could produce that from the material that we have here in New Zealand? But what would it take for that to be commercially viable? But also, are New Zealand consumers even willing to pay for New Zealand produced products? Because they'll usually cost more than the imported option. And so if anyone can answer that question and how we can, build consumer appetite for paying more for New Zealand produced products, that would be of huge value to our industry. So I'll just leave that there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Emily. We've got time for at least one or two questions. Yeah.
Have you been across what's happening in Hawke's Bay with the peaches and
Yes.
Waddies?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'm just wanting to comment on...
Sure, that's actually in my speaker notes here.
Okay.
Look what's happening with Waddies canned peaches. For people who didn't see that news, Waddies recently cut supply contracts for a lot of our peach growers because New Zealanders don't want to pay more for New Zealand-grown canned peaches, and so they're importing instead. So if you want to think about what you as a consumer can do to support local supply of fruits and vegetables, it's buying local fruits and vegetables.
Drop 3 more produce.
Yeah.
Just a comment more than anything. I'm assuming you guys have been speaking to the government about tax breaks for local producers?
Tax breaks is not something that we currently advocate for now.
The diagram you had showing where all the money goes and going to the majority going to the retailers and the wholesalers, that's you haven't crunched any numbers to get that? That's just illustrative, is it?
It's just illustrative. I would love if someone could make this diagram with real numbers. That's my dream. I've been told it's not possible because the information is too commercially sensitive that no one would ever give it to you. But maybe Jacob can make it for us. Yeah.
The grower, the wholesale, the retail market stuff was released in Fresh Practice 2024 last year. Just the cost of inputs was not released by growers. So the stuff beyond the farm gate was released, and we've worked out what goes to the growers, which is about 40% of the total cost that you pay at the supermarket. I think it's 42% of what you pay at the supermarket goes to the grower. But behind the farm gate, the costs the growers weren't willing to get. Yes, so 42% between the grower earnings and cost of imports.
So that kind of what that suggests to me is looking at more localised distribution systems. I'm just wondering about your group's thoughts about that.
I think that we operate based on scale, right? Like when I think about fruits and vegetables, I think about where are most New Zealanders buying their fruits and vegetables? And the answer is supermarkets. And that has to do with a lot of things, and most of it's convenience, and what's available to them. And so the opportunities to make a difference in this story at any scale for our industry, I think have to sit with relationships with the supermarkets. Yeah.
Final question here from Kelly.
What about community co-ops that buy together and get distributed to?
Wonderful, beautiful, gorgeous, love it. It's really small. It's like really small scale. Like when you look at, we have, I don't know what it is, like 700 vegetable growers, and how many of them would be contributing to those co-ops, and also how many people are being fed by those co-ops out of the 5 million who need to be fed in New Zealand. It's fantastic. It's just a tiny piece of the puzzle.
Lovely. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Another sobering presentation. Okay, now I'm going to actually consult the order. So next up we have Hannah Blumhardt. Sorry. Yes, Hannah Blumhardt, lead researcher at Reuse Aotearoa and zero waste practitioner. Welcome, Hannah, who's going to be talking about packaging in the grocery sector.
Is it 5 minutes?
You've got 10 minutes total, so if you use your 10, you won't get any questions.
Oh, okay, no, I won't do that. Okay, cool. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Hannah tōku ingoa. I'm here speaking on behalf of Reuse Aotearoa, which is an organisation that investigates, researches reuse practices and organisational models for waste reduction and community building strategies. So I'm going to be talking today about this report that's literally just been released. Reusable packaging in the Aotearoa New Zealand grocery sector, understanding impacts and outcomes. So this was produced under the umbrella of Aotearoa, which is a multi-partner research project into the circular economy funded by MB's Endeavour Fund. It included researchers from Aotearoa, from Reuse Aotearoa, and from the Bioeconomy Science Institute, formerly Manaaki Whenua, including Graydon. Why look at measuring the impacts and outcomes of reusable packaging? Well, hopefully you're all aware that moving from single-use to reusable packaging is a non-negotiable part of the transition to the circular economy. This is because every time you use a single-use package, you use it once and then it's thrown away. So this is an inherently linear business model. In contrast, reusable packaging is a classical circular business model because each container is designed to be reused multiple times, removing the need to continually extract raw materials to make new packaging and reducing loads of waste. Why look at this in the grocery sector? Because packaging is used across multiple sectors. It's because the grocery sector is heavily reliant on single-use packaging. As the United Nations Environment Programme has noted, single-use packaging dominates the supermarket food packaging almost completely. And this is a packaging type that touches all of our lives and brings disposable practices into people's everyday life. Measuring the impact of reusable packaging is not really done very much by anyone, which is a problem because transitioning to circular business models generally is a major disruption to the status quo. And in the grocery sector specifically, it would be requiring major shifts across supply chains, manufacturer, retailer, and consumer behaviour. And so it's perfectly reasonable that those actors would want to know that making this transition is worth the effort and would want methodologies to be able to track progress against this over time. So for our research project, we really focused on how can we measure the real-world impacts of current existing reusable packaging systems in Aotearoa New Zealand's grocery sector, comparing this to single-use packaging systems across a range of indicators. So we started with a literature review, and in parallel, we also had a kaupapa Māori research study into the relationship between reuse and te ao Māori. Bringing together the findings from these two reviews, we developed 7 indicators across environmental health, socioeconomic, and cultural areas. And then we applied these to real-world examples. So we chose 6 everyday products that are available in single-use and reusable packaging in New Zealand's grocery sector: milk, toothpaste, pumpkin seeds, oats, olive oil, and dishwashing liquid. We followed their packaging through the supply chain from the final point of distribution to the retail shelf, looking at the consumer-facing primary packaging as well as secondary and tertiary packaging. We worked with, interviewed retailers and producers and suppliers across 2 regions, Waikato and Wellington. We completed a customer survey, we did site visits, as well as desktop research of business websites. So through completing this exercise, we really learned a lot about the barriers to measuring circularity. We experienced this in terms of measuring reuse impact, but I think a lot of this is extrapolatable to other areas. Firstly, this is really novel research. There weren't a lot of blueprints to follow in this area, nor was there a community of practice to kind of knowledge share. There are some more established ways of measuring impact for recycling. However, this is not really transferable to waste avoidance, reduction and reuse, and sometimes can be quite misleading. Furthermore, we were quite ambitious with our indicators. We had a breadth of impacts and indicators to look at. This really requires multidisciplinary teams to be able to properly design and apply methods. We had a multidisciplinary team, but we probably could have done with some more economists. Noting what Jay said earlier about not wanting people with fine arts degrees to do everything. Not that any of us had a fine arts degree, and that probably would have helped too for some of those graphs. Anyway, the other barrier we found was very practical in that producers and retailers do not consistently keep or report on the key data points that we needed for our indicators. For example, packaging consumption. Furthermore, a lot of businesses in the grocery sector who are reliant on single-use packaging, quite surprisingly, weren't very enthusiastic to participate to find out how much single-use packaging they were using. So these 2 factors meant that it was extraordinarily time-consuming to gather our data, and we had to make a lot of assumptions. So I'd love to show you some of the findings we made on 2 other indicators, but you'll just have to ask me about that if you're interested. And I'll jump straight to some future needs for reusable packaging impact measurement based on how we navigated our barriers. Firstly, it is so important that producers, suppliers and retailers in New Zealand's grocery sector are required and supported to capture and report on their packaging footprint, on their actual reuse rates if they're using reusable packaging, and their actual recycling rates if they're using single-use packaging. In terms of future research, we really need more robust methods to quantify the food waste impact of different packaging systems, as well as the job creation impacts of different packaging systems. We really need a more in-depth exploration of the human health risks of different packaging materials used in different packaging systems. We really found that it was not on anybody's radar that different packaging materials contain chemicals of concern that are known to transfer into food, and how does reusing or single use amplify or mitigate against that. We'd love to see more life cycle analyses actually compare real-world examples of single-use and reusable packaging systems. And we really need more Māori-led or co-designed with Māori research projects into reusable packaging. So if you'd like to learn more about some of our findings and read our report, you can now check it out on our website, Reuse Aotearoa. So yeah, thank you very much.
Hannah, you don't go away. You've actually got time for a question. Come on back.
I have a question. What was on the other slide?
I'm so glad you asked. So I mentioned we did environmental health and, oh, hello, Graydon. You can help. You can help. No, that would be great. So we had environmental health and socioeconomic, and so one of them was packaging avoided for the environment, and one of them for accessibility, we looked at price comparisons. So for the milk, you can see here, this is the weight of the packaging and the different systems broken down by materials. So these are the single use. So you can see the amount of plastic in orange there. These are all the reuse systems. Almost all of them perform better after just 10 reuses of the bottles, which is a very conservative reuse rate for those systems. We compared milk sold on tap with milk in glass bottles. And this one in glass bottles, the retailer received 10-litre bladders of milk that they then decanted into the glass bottles. So that's why this one has a bigger, that's cardboard, the cardboard impact of shipping those bladders. But so you can see reusable packaging has just an amazing, like even a poorly performing one. But when you do the price comparisons, this is the single-use system, and these are the reuse. So you can see that great packaging waste impact, but not very affordable. And this is not taking into account the deposits that are an upfront price, sometimes the same cost. So even though it's redeemable, if you bring the bottle back, it's an upfront cost. And I'll just show you the pumpkin seeds one, because this is a different reuse system. This is buying from bulk bins, so requires people to bring their own containers. If they don't bring their own, then nothing's really, well, this is what we track. So these are the refill systems, and these are the single-use systems by grams. So this is number of packages and number of components. So we did it by weight, but we also did it by number of packages for all the products. So these are refill systems where we assumed a 50% BYO rate. So if only 50% of people bring their own containers, you can still see that there's just the amount of packages. You've got almost 400 packages there versus the SAC model. And this is from 2 retailers who don't give out disposable packages, they only use repurposed glass jars. And so you can see the impact if people bring their own containers. And this is factoring in the packaging to deliver the bulk product too. So, you know, we often hear, oh, well, if I shop at Bin Inn, does it really make a difference because all the packaging to bring it to the shop? That's why we looked at the supply chain packaging. And yeah, it does make a difference. And again, though, the pricing, it's not quite as bad as with the milk. But you can still see that the reusables are more expensive, but this is partly because the type of product that tends to be in the types of stores that have refill are a premium product. They're New Zealand grown pumpkin seeds as opposed to imported.
So the point we make about reusable systems is they're internalising the costs of end-of-life disposal, right? Whereas single-use is externalised to councils, ratepayers, that kind of thing. So that's why it's not an even playing field, and that's why, and the price comparisons really show that, eh?
Yeah.
One more question, and then we'll...
Sorry,
no, don't go anywhere. Yeah. We've got one more question.
Sorry.
I guess my question is, I just love all the work you're doing, and how do we make sure the data is accurate? For example, in our house, if I do the grocery shopping, I would present very different data than if my husband does it. So, like, not to throw him under the bus, but, like, it's a bit stressful because if I don't go buy the toothpaste, he'll come home with, like, 4 tubes of toothpaste, so he won't have to remember again for a long time. So I guess, is there anything, like, from a comms perspective that we can do to help people like him come along on the journey? I'm working on it, trust me.
So we did do customer surveys of customers who were shopping in these more zero-wasty stores, overwhelmingly female and quite well off. But, you know, those were the people that responded to the survey as well, so I'm not sure how reliable that is. I think one of the important things is that I think for a lot of people, that barrier of does it really make a difference, though, like the effort? And so to be able to present a story where it's like, yes, look how much difference you make if you bring your own container versus if you always buy. And for the toothpaste, again, the refill by bulk dispenser method had a 0 packaging impact compared to the toothpaste tubes. So I think that is part of the story for some people, will be like, it does make a difference. I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure if that's the case for everybody, but I don't know.
Thank you, Hannah. It's all right. Bear with me. Okay. We are changing focus now to move to shift to look at the fibre industry. So I'd like to welcome up Bernadette Casey. So I just found my notes. Bernadette is co-founder and chief executive of Usefully, a textile clean tech company driving circular economy innovation in Aotearoa New Zealand. Over to you, Bernadette.
Kia ora koutou, Bernadette Casey, taka wingwa. Thank you. Yes, so I'm the CEO of Usefully, and we're a textile clean tech company. We grew out of the Textile Reuse Program, which was a program funded by New Zealand businesses in the textile sector to co-design the textile circular economy for Aotearoa and then to develop solutions. And initially we trialled textile-to-textile recycling, but we found economically it simply was unfeasible in New Zealand. So then we turned to look at what were the highest value products we could create out of this resource. This image is out of Scottish household waste, and the mustard line down here is textile waste by volume, and then the waste by impact. So you can see there's a real outsized impact to volume. Unlike plastics and other materials, their impact to volume is quite similar, but textiles is really outsized. So for that reason, we're starting to see textiles be regulated around the world. European Union has recently announced all 27 member states have to establish product stewardship schemes or extended producer responsibility schemes. Australia has a scheme setting up now, and next week the Textile Advisory Group, they've commissioned Eunomia to do a piece of research on the cost-benefit analysis of such a scheme for New Zealand, and that research is out next week. So having trialled textile-to-textile recycling, we used a technology. We took Air New Zealand's uniforms from their LA base and used a Californian-based textile recycler. But we found that both from an environmental and from an economics perspective, it wouldn't work in New Zealand. So this prompted us to look at textiles not from a product of textiles, but from a resource. And effectively, all your animal fibres, wool, silk, cashmere, etc., are all proteins. All your plant fibres, cotton, linen, hemp, are cellulosic, and then you have your petrochemical mixes of polyester, nylon, etc. And so we looked at them from a resource level and what were the highest value products that we could turn them into. We took a technology set out of Scion, or the Bioeconomy Research Institute, which they developed for timber processing, and we adapted it for textiles. And our first product, you can see on the terrace. So we trialled cotton, polyester and polycotton as fibre replacements into the roading industry, which currently imports fibre from Czech, brings it all the way over here, and it goes into our roads. So Wellington City Council put their hands up and said, we'll trial it. And so as you can see, it's the bottom end of the terrace. This was late in 2022. We've still got our COVID masks on. And what it has proved, what it demonstrated, there was an improvement in the performance and durability of the road. It reduced what's called the drain down, it's the asphalt draining down, and improved the response to load and to force cohesion. and then it displaces imported product. I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to get it wrong. and of course, diversion of textiles from landfill. So that was our first product. And then we've gone on to develop a range of different products. Actually, that picture on the right at scale doesn't look very pleasing. I'm just looking at that like, oh, that's not so good. Anyway, it looks all right when it's little. So our products now go into, we've got 2 roading products, go into adhesives, into mortars, into building products. And interestingly, our highest value product is 5 times more valuable than turning it into textiles. So, I've been in the textile circular economy for a while, and I wrote my first article back in 17 years ago, 2008, and it was a piece for a book called Melting Point by an American marine biologist. Dr. Eric Dorfman was writing a book on climate change, and I was invited to contribute to it. And since then, I've worked solely on textile circular economy projects around the world and in New Zealand. And what I've come to observe is that, and this is a challenge that we're facing, is that this Western view of a closed loop circular economy, I believe, is really constraining our progress in this space. When there's no kind of surprise, or our putting our resources into an open loop, like not back into textiles but into other high value products, was really intentional, because at the time when we were doing the design, Dewey Sharif and a Māori, Professor Tina Bossa Dean, thank you. They had looked at Kay Rayworth's donut economy and then applied a Te Ao Māori perspective to it. And that Māori perspective is a spiral, and the spiral is something that we see across the globe, across multiple cultures, and from time immemorial, like our ancestors were drawing in spirals, etc. And when you look at that image, you can just see the potentiality of a spiral versus a circle. And this is, when we know better, we can do better. And I think rather than talking about a circular economy, I think we need to move to a discussion around a spiral economy and what that would look like. Because at the moment, particularly we've seen it in Europe, this real ideology around textiles have to go back into textiles. But we know that the environmental impacts of that are not great. And we also know that, it's not a scalable system. They've been trying to prove this for over 10 years and with little progress. And so if we change our thinking to what would that spiral of resources look like, where resources are held at their highest value, what would that look like for us? Anyway, that's it. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to say one thing. So we're now fully commercial. We've got a plant up in Auckland. We're currently putting machinery into the plant at the moment. And from January, we'll be able to process about 3 tonnes a week of textile waste. So we've gone from concept to testing and proving through to commerciality. And we've got commercial customers like Resine and other building customers. Yeah. That's it.
Thanks, Bernadette. We've got time for one quick question, I think, and then we'll have to move on.
Thank you. That was really interesting. I wondered whether what we're seeing now, in the ways we are comparing this circle and the spiral, that if we change the perspective, the spiral could start to look like the taututu. And the escalation that Jay talked about, maybe is that what makes a spiral different from the circle?
Bernadette wasn't here this morning to hear Jay's talk, so
I'm
it's a bit
sorry.
tricky.
But this is then a question for the audience here, to try and think about perspective, and in which dimension would that perspective start to shift? Thank you.
Cool. I think we might move on just so we've got time for other speakers. But very cool news about the plant happening in Auckland. Very exciting. So I'd like to welcome up next Tessa Bradley. Tessa is Head of Product and Sustainability at Koto, a New Zealand fashion-based brand known for its commitment to ethical and sustainable practices. Tessa, over to you. There we go.
I have to apologise, my slides are not as exciting as everyone else's. I don't have fancy graphs and things, but hey. Kia ora, thank you for having me. My name's Tessa. I've been at Koto for 9.5 years, but working in the sustainability space for the last 4 years, so it's all a very fresh place for me, but I'll do my best to be informative. So yes, we are Koto. We were founded in 2006. We are a fair trade organic cotton clothing brand based in New Zealand, and we manufacture in India. I thought I'd start with this quote, which I think really sums up the ethos of Koto, and that is that there are two reasons why Koto was born. One was to ensure fashion could be made in a humane, ethical and kind way, and the other to work with nature and not against it. At Koto, our biggest circular success has been designing for longevity and recovery from the inception of each of the designs. So Koto garments have always been made from certified 100% fair trade organic cotton. But after years of research and testing, we've managed to replace conventional trims with natural and biodegradable alternatives. So the industry norm is usually a synthetic component, so polyester threads, polyester buttons, metal zips, all things that are really hard to repair or obviously break down. So in 2024, we launched our first ever plastic-free collection and measured the volume of the trims and components we were... Oh, did I just skip two? Yep. We measured the volume of the trims and components, and we were replaced from that season, and this ensures that our garments can safely return to nature at the end of use. 4 years ago, we launched our Take Back program as a resource stream for Koto garments that can't be repaired and have reached the end of their usable life. As part of our sorting process, we remove any trims, either for reuse as part of our repair program or return to suppliers to recycle them into new trims. As part of our, we launched our repair program in 2018. Each garment is assessed by a customer care team and is deemed repairable and worked on by our skilled repair partners in our New Zealand workroom or with our repair partners in Australia. We provide a comprehensive care guide on our website to show customers how to carefully and mindfully care and clean their Koto garments to extend the life of their clothing. Koto Relove adds a fresh purpose to pre-loved Koto garments that deserve more wear, and Relove is part of the Koto journey to become a fully circular business. One of the best things that we can do for our planet is to keep our garments in use for longer. So we want to give our community an opportunity to pass on clothes that they no longer wear, but still have a lot of love to give. Together, these steps are closing the loop for design, use, recovery, proving that circularity starts at the design table and not at the end life. The barriers. Material innovation gaps. There's still limited technology for true fibre-to-fibre recycling of natural fibres at commercial scale, especially being based down in New Zealand. We found that when we looked at other parts of the globe that do textile-to-textile recycling, the feedstock tonnage, MOQ, minimum quantities, were way too high. We have a humble 1 tonne of textile waste that we've collected over the last 7 years, but we don't kind of look at it as a waste anymore. We are looking at it as a resource, and we're starting to do some innovative things with that resource at the moment to be able to potentially return it back to the earth. Traceability and data gaps. Although we collect data from our suppliers, there's no unified method to measure the circular flows, materials, water, energy, and across the entire fashion supply chain. Infrastructure mismatch. New Zealand has limited local textile recycling or composting infrastructure, meaning even circular materials often end up in landfill. Economic barriers. The cost of small batch circular innovation like repair and resale is high compared to producing new garments at scale, and it puts many brands off. Cultural behaviour, so the fast fashion habits still dominate. Circularity needs both system and consumer change. Durability and care must be revalued, and repair should be part of education. So research. So we need shared metrics to measure circularity beyond waste diversion. Ones that capture material retention, product life cycle, and regeneration. We need to develop standard indicators for the circular textiles, for example, percentage of materials recaptured and garments resold, and what value does that add to the product. The next generation are already starting to think about what is the resale value of that garment before they even purchase it. We need to map the textile material flows in Aotearoa to quantify where garments actually go after use, measure carbon and water impacts of circular models versus linear ones to demonstrate tangible environmental gains, and explore consumer participation models, what motivates take back and repair engagement in small markets like New Zealand, and what technology is required to support that. Research that helps us connect design decisions with measurable circular outcomes would inform businesses to change their models and ultimately change consumer behaviour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I reckon we've got time for 3 questions. Ooh. So, yes, over here.
Really great talk. Oh, can you hear me? Really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. I was wondering if you could talk about affordability for consumers, as I know that can be a bit of a barrier to engaging in sustainable fashion.
Yeah. I mean, for us, being a sustainable brand it comes with a lot of costs. There is increasing costs, especially around certification. So we are Fair Trade certified, we're Global Organic Textile Standards certified, we're B Corp certified, we're also Living Wage accredited. So our base costs are super expensive, but that's why we try to bring in, well, we have brought in our Relove program. So that was a true sort of accessibility piece for people that might not be able to afford our full price items. But yeah, also I think producing offshore has also helped with keeping our costs down as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Tessa. That was great. I just wondered about how you actually engage with consumers around the use life of garments. Like you've got a repair dimension there, but also about washing garments. Is there much of a kind of service relation in that use life where you actually get people to think about extending that use life?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, we use our social media platforms a lot to communicate with our customers around longevity and durability of their garments. But we also have a collective program, which is it's a loyalty program where we actually incentivise customers to repair their own garments or use our repair program as well. So you can actually learn how to repair a garment and then you earn points to then spend on some more koto garments. Yeah, or repair services, yeah.
And what about the seasonality of your aesthetics? I mean, is there a great turnover in that respect? Because we know about the sort of micro seasons of fast fashion.
Yeah.
How do you handle that aesthetic?
Yeah, we have had over the years we've had some flux. So we always were Fair Trade Organic Cotton, and then we found that we wanted to branch out into the Northern Hemispheres, and obviously it gets very, very cold up in the Northern Hemisphere. So we sort of started branching out into it's called ZQ Merino, which is regenerative merino from New Zealand, to offer sort of some more warmth to that market. And then we got into recycled nylon swimwear so that we were appealing to the resort customer. But then what we found pre-COVID, that it was It wasn't like we had a really robust supply chain, but it was kind of muddying the water. And we have this ultimate goal of wanting to be able to return our clothing back to the earth, and we obviously weren't going to be able to do that with having a recycled nylon swimwear in the range. So we actually stripped that all back, and we actually cancelled one of our best-selling items, which was a cotton elastane legging, because of the difficulties around separating the elastane out of the cotton. So we tried to, I guess, to answer your question, cater to all of those customers and the different seasonalities and stuff, but we actually found that we just didn't want to do that in the end.
I was actually thinking more about fashion seasons and making an intervention there rather than thermal seasons.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if only we could do that. The fashion calendar is very hard to break, especially if you are trying to work with a wholesale model like we are. Actually, we probably, if we just stopped doing wholesale, we could probably do whatever we want. But wholesalers purchase at a very certain time of year because they have budgets and they want to spend that across different brands. So the fashion model is extremely hard to break, especially if you're tied to a wholesale model, I think. But we are very slow. It takes us 18 months from design inception through to the very first launch of our collections. But we do still do, we don't even call it winter and summer, but winter and summer ranges, yeah.
Thank you very much, Tessa. I think we'll move on to the next speaker. So I'd like to welcome Adrienne Whitewood. Adrienne is a fashion designer and creative director whose work draws deeply from Māori culture, Māori art and traditional concepts. Welcome. Just some instructions there to George.
Tēnā tātou katoa, ko ai au, ki te tau tōku pāpā no rongo whakāta me Ngāti Kahungunu ahau, ki te tau tōku māma no ngā puhi me ngai tai ahau. I tipu ake au ki Rotorua, toko whāku tamariki, ko taku tino mahi, ko ngā mahi kākahu toi tū, ngā mahi kākahu toi. My favourite mahi in life is fashion. My kuia, she taught me how to sew at the age of 8, and it's just been a lifelong passion of mine. And he mihi nui ki ngā pau o tēnei kaupapa. It's just been awesome to hear all these speakers, and I've gotten such rich information from everybody here. So thank you so much for having me. My kaupapa today is about a project that I've been working on for a while. My passion is Māori design, Indigenous Māori art. And what I like to say is my kakahu is for a forever piece. But I had a challenge of, well, what does that really mean in terms of ancestral knowledge? So I've been working on a kaupapa which is called Kākahu Toitū. Whatu ngaro te tangata, Toitū te whenua, as people disappear from sight, the land remains. My ethos is all about creating an emotional connection to Indigenous design. So I grew up as a tour guide in Rotorua, and many times I heard stories that our different kapa would tell the tourists about how our ancestors used to sleep, and hauora and rongoa Māori was very much part of our life. So that's Māori medicine and Māori wisdom in terms of our natural medicine. So every night I would hear this, that our ancestors slept on beds of kawakawa. Kawakawa is a healing plant used for medicinal purposes in Māori medicine. And for me, I really romanticised that idea that our ancestors were so close to nature that we lived and breathed medicine. And I wondered, how could I take this information and transfer it into kākahu? So that has been my journey. I took a proposal to Scion, which was many years ago now, and I wanted to create a truly, now I've learnt a new word, spiral, kaupapa to them about creating a fibre that is made in Aotearoa, is processed in Aotearoa, and also is getting rid of the pests. So this is a fabric that has been around for a long time. It's merino and possum. We call it perino here in New Zealand. And it's basically using merino, which is from our sheep, and also utilising a pest here, which is our possum. So I've worked with them for many years, New Zealand NITCO in Auckland. But then I had this idea of, well, how can I put this concept into fabric, of Māori medicine into fabric. Arohamai, that is the concept. So I took that to Scion, and we've been working on that for a few years. The process that we're currently working on, and I'm not a scientist, so this is my understanding of it, is we are using a tannin process to try and, well, my idea at first was, how can I encapsulate rongoa into fabric? I know they do it in the UK, they do micro-encapsulation with lavender. And I know Karen Walker here, who's a New Zealand designer, she's also used rose, and she's put that into socks. So my whole kaupapa was, putting rongoa Māori into fibre. We've done this, and we've been testing it at the moment using a tannin process, using Indaria. If anyone is familiar with Indaria, it's a invasive species of seaweed, come from China. And there are some Māori agro businesses who are using this as fertiliser. We're currently looking at how we can use that as a tanning process to apply our rongoa into our fibre. So that is what I am currently working on, and also why I am here. Some of the challenges that we've come up with is just, money, really. I didn't realise when I was going to sign with this idea how much it would cost. I think they've self-funded it, but it was $100,000 just to test the first concept. So we don't even have the proof of concept yet. Another barrier has been, the length of time it's taken. And also, one thing that I've noticed from trying to apply for funding is obviously when the government changes, they just wipe away our funding. But also something interesting that I came up against was it was a type of funding. I think it was He Aka Katoro. Well, the barrier to entry there was, it was based on first in, first serve. So if you're somebody like me who's never done proposals fast enough, it was just whoever could get into that proposal. So I wonder how could they measure that in terms of quality? It was basically whoever came in first got that funding. And I think the funding, I'm not too sure whether it was something like 7 million to 30 million. So you imagine the amount of quality, like who did they get? It'd be interesting to see, because that portal closed quite quickly. Another thing is, high cost of production in New Zealand, and I really love this idea that I've come up with, but I guess that's why I'm here. I'm trying to think of ways where it's not just a novelty, it can be used in, whether it's liners at the marae, filler on the insides of mattresses. It's basically creating antimicrobial fibre through rongoa Māori. So that is my passion at the moment, and I just love to hear, and I have already, so thank you so much to people who've given me cards and just information on where to, because I would love to share ancestral knowledge through fibre and how that can go into the commercial world. That's really a passion of mine. So thank you for having me. I hope I have gotten through everything. That was it. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa.
Thank you, Adrienne. We've got time for 2 to 3 questions for Adrienne. Is anyone? Yeah.
I shall apologise in advance. This is the accountant speaking. Have you assessed product market fit for this product to determine which distribution pathways are most effective to actually commercialise, so that you can access that funding more effectively with that knowledge to hand?
Yeah, and I guess again that is just through trying to secure funding. So we want to get, what I've said on the screen, putia for research and design, but it's just trying to get that funding to do that research, because that's where we're at the moment, is trying to secure funding. So if anybody knows of any ways, I'd be so grateful.
What's the trial showing so far? Like, how's...
So obviously, if you had seen the slides, I've forgotten her name, she showed the different proteins and chemicals of the fibre. Well, what we're finding with the possum merino is, because if you're familiar with possum, it has a hole in the centre, and I think it's not taking well to the tannins. So we're now trialling merino 100% and seeing how that goes, because at the moment, we've basically spent 100,000 and it's not worked. So hopefully with this next round, we'll get there.
Have you looked at other wool breeds, other than New Zealand merino, because as an option that are not more costs?
That's a good question. I'm only limited to the manufacturers I work with as well, and New Zealand, as anybody will know, is so small in terms of, I think there's only Y Yarns I know that does the yarn here. There's literally only one company, I think, who still spins yarn in New Zealand. So again, the manufacturers here are only limited to whatever they've got available. So merino is the only truly spiral product I think we have in New Zealand, and whatever merino they're bringing out. So but that is a good question.
Can I just make a suggestion?
Yes.
Previously, we've received funding from the British wool industry, and they are, and this sounds a bit terrible coming from New Zealand, but they do fund a wide range of projects, and they might actually assist you with getting market distribution outside of New Zealand. But just a thought.
Thank you so much. That's why I'm here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Kia ora, Adrienne. Ko Angela Kilford-Tuku ingoa. It's nice to hear from you today. And I've bought many gifts from your store. Thank you. I've got a really geeky kind of question about the rongoā properties from the seaweed, and what you're trying to achieve by going through that tannin process with the fibre. Like, is there coloration there as well, or is it just imbuing it with other properties for wellness?
Yes, that's again another question that I actually probably didn't cover. Is what we are currently working with is the antimicrobial properties of harakeke. And we're using Undaria as the tannin to apply that. That is the only rongoā Māori we have used so far, because we're restricted in terms of what we can test because of the financial side. But so far we are currently just using harakeke, because if anybody knows, harakeke is flax, so it relates to fibre and wearable kakahu as well. So is that what you were
Thank you for answering. And I get that you're layering the modi onto your fibre, which is really cool, and we'll give you, we haven't got a card, we'll talk later on the cool, and maybe we want to try and get you some money somehow too. Okay.
Yay!
Thank you so much.
Cool. Let's give Adrienne a round of applause. So we have an exciting last speaker who is not on the list but has appeared. So I would like to welcome up Kelly McLean. Kelly is an independent contractor and researcher who has been working on MB's bioeconomy workstream and recently, as part of a recently announced project, the Common Ground Future of Fibre Aotearoa pilot. So Kelly, do you want to come up? There's no slides, but Kelly's just going to riff for us. Welcome.
Kia ora, I'm Kelly. So I've got a bit of briefing. So
Yeah, so I think by way of background, and thank you, I think that was pretty good. So there's 2 projects I'd like to just quickly touch on, but there's probably 4 things if I can sort of get that in your mind after this 5 minutes. So I've got a pretty diverse background. I'm from Massey originally, so textiles is what I studied, not fine arts, but I have ended up getting into sustainability and measurement over the past 12 years through life cycle assessment, and then later on through sustainability projects that have been quite complex. So the kinds of sectors I've worked in have been the film industry, fast-moving consumer goods, packaging, textiles, manufacturing, built environment, and then more recently policy. And where I really love to understand a bit more is around that consumer and business kind of change piece. So I'm sort of one of those people that sit between different fields, and I'm a connector or like a bridge sometimes between different ideas, because you can kind of bring experience from other sectors into new spaces, and they have a whole different impact. So I just wanted to spotlight a few things. So sometimes people are like, oh, what is the government doing on circular economy? Well, there was an amazing work program that was led by their strategy team that was around building their circular economy strategy. And all of that amazing sort of reports and research is actually available online now. So even though they discontinued doing that work about 2 years ago, you can actually find some of the reports that they were working on up to that point. And one particular project that I worked on and led was the manufacturing piece. So one thing that was amazing through that process was the importance of place. So what we could see when we were mapping out where all the different manufacturing activities were happening in the motu were clusters of activities happening in different parts. And so from a circular economy perspective, it's really, really important to understand those materials and flows that are coming through the different activities. And we started to see that actually, yes, place does matter. And what we looked at was potentially what kinds of waste streams were coming out of those activities, and then also the types of emissions and levels of emissions potentially as well, and energy requirements. So that was at a national level, but I think just a takeaway from that is the importance of place. It's all available online. Another thing I wanted to flag was this idea of circular economy and creativity being able to come together through different opportunities, and how important it is to collaborate. So earlier in the year when I was working on a project with the ACT government over in Canberra, we looked at the establishment of a textile hub in place. And the people that we had in the room were community groups that were creating crafts and art from textiles, but recyclers, we had designers, and we had all the logistics people sort of in one place trying to solve this challenge. And so what that kind of taught me was like, it's incredibly amazing being able to work through that whole value chain and its complexity, and being able to actually get that consensus around what waste might actually mean, because what came out of that was actually that we needed to value our textiles more. And so some of the conversations shifted. And then just finally, future of Fibre Aotearoa. So AgMart's just announced about a week ago, so you can go onto the Common Ground website, and there's a bit of a sort of overview of the program. But it's a 2-year piece of work that will be a community of action, being able to explore what the fibre ecosystem in New Zealand is doing right now, where it can go, recognising that food and fibre is very different. So you've got on one hand a consumer product that's sort of going through quite a short life cycle, and then with fibre, it's a very durable life cycle. It's longer. Design's incredibly important in the product that comes out of it. And the R&D is very different as well. So wanting to be able to, I'll use that word, bridge again, bridge, connect, wool, harakeke, hemp, mycelium, fermented fibres that's sort of in the lab. We think that there's a really amazing story to be told in that space, and wouldn't it be nice if circular and regenerative practices were embedded right at the foundation of those conversations and not just a side project. So that's what that's all about. The first year is around foundational mapping, ecosystem understanding, being able to go and say, hey, look, this is what we've found, this is how big the sector is, this is some opportunities. I have no doubt that circular opportunities will be part of that story. And then the second year is around pilots and turning that stuff into action. And the way that we would win for that particular project is if industry and academia and researchers can come together and progress things that they've been wanting to do for a while, but maybe haven't had those opportunities to meet. So I just think, I guess my research question is, how can we work better together? How can we not be competitive, or like, what does the pre-competitive space look like? How can we actually move New Zealand Inc. across as well? And yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Yes, we have time for 1 to 2 questions, depending on how long they are. Anyone got anything? This is prompted. Kelly? No, nothing? People are thinking about afternoon tea? Yes.
Have you got any ideas so far on how we dial down the competitiveness and work together?
So far it's been actually removing that funding piece that was sort of discussed. Yeah, so like when people kind of know, hey, look, this is the expectations of like a third space, almost like that. You're walking into a cafe, you can kind of meet, oh, actually, this is kind of like a third space. You know, it's okay to meet people and have those conversations, rather than, transacting, sort of like, they're meeting me just so they can get some kind of thing across the line. And what I've found is that when you start to talk and open up those conversations, you find out what people are doing, and then all of a sudden you see over here, oh, they're looking for that thing, they need to talk. But otherwise, sometimes people are quite suspicious, so trust is a really big part. Yeah, and we've been able to sort of get people on board from across the whole value chain, which has been incredible, and it's been quite a big process over the last 3 to 4 months to sort of get that going. Yeah. But talking, being able to meet. Yeah.
And someone who has the relational skills to broker that, right?
The brokers, well, you've got to be positive as well, because actually there's a lot of negativity in the space, but I just see all the opportunities because so many people are doing amazing things, but they don't know about it, and there's not really a forum to share it. So, yeah, I think at the very least in the next year people will know more about what's happening.
Cool. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
We're about to break for afternoon tea, but I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers. It's been really fascinating. Thank you for taking on the challenge of 5 to 8 minutes. It's a real hard time length. And thank you so much for just coming and joining us today. I've really appreciated it, and I'm sure others in the room have as well. So after 3, we've got afternoon tea till 3:30, and then 3:30 we're back in here for a final panel discussion. So head off and then have a cuppa.